So Brittany,
So Rachel,
we just aired the first of a two-part series with Elissa Tucker and Liz McLean talking about human capital management and KM and how they work beautifully together. Hopefully you took a listen to the episode. No crazy cold open for this one. We're going to dive right into episode 2. Anything you want to add?
enjoy.
Enjoy. Roll the intro.
What's the point of another KN podcast? Well, I tell you, we've got every kind of point. Like power and share, laser and main, bullet and prize, focus and pain, power and stands for knowledge management, by the way. Laser and main, skip it, bullet and prize, focus and pain. Not another KN podcast. Not an FMRAM podcast. Not another KN podcast. Not just any other KN podcast.
Yeah. Welcome back to Elissa and Liz. We are so glad to have you back for another episode where we're going to talk a little bit more about how this collaboration can look in practice. So if you missed the first episode that we did where Liz and Elissa really introduced themselves, I would encourage you to go back and listen to at least, listen to all of it. It was a great conversation, but definitely something that you want to check out before maybe you move into part 2. So welcome back to Liz McLean and Elissa Tucker from APQC. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Of course. Yeah. So looking at KM and human capital management collaboration and how it looks in practice, when the mandate is as broad as upskill the workforce, where should an organization actually start? And I'm just going to toss that out to both of you. So whoever wants to hit the hardball question first. Oh, Liz, your hand's up. Go.
Sure enough. And I'm speaking strictly from the what do we know, what don't we know, what do we need to know, what do we need to do aspect. I think that no matter where you look, no matter what you're reading, you'll first see that the data that you're drawing from, no matter where it's coming from, needs to be tip-top shape. In other words, governed, curated, and ready to roll so that when you do anything and you're querying that data, whether it's a knowledge graph or separate silos, whatever it is, you want that data to be really spot on and really updated. Because if you're using AI and you're pointing it to your data and your data is bad, you're going to get a bad outcome. So a starting point for that is, okay, from the data standpoint, we have to clean our act up. We have to keep what's relevant, what's critical, and et cetera. So that's a great role for knowledge managers. A role for the whole suite, the whole organization is to set the time aside for mentoring, for problem solving together, for collaborative community discussions. If you're not sure where you're headed with your AI initiative, start with the people. And KMers and human capital people are the ways to start with the people. Here's our strategic mandate. Here are the concepts around that. What are our people doing and what do they know? What is their expertise? And then how do we do a map of those things? You can call it an audit, you can call it a map, but you want something that immediately shows you, okay, we thought we knew a ton about blah, 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 but there's nothing in our data about blah, blah, blah. Or, you want to see what's really there versus what you think is there. And from there, you create a culture. It's no small order. You create a culture of getting human capacities, uniquely human skills bolstered up so that you know what you're capable of and what you need to build capability toward. And once you know those things, then you tailor your learning, you tailor your interactions, your mentoring, any kind of knowledge exchange that elicits the tacit and the explicit. You tailor that into your workflows. And so that's just a baseline. So that involves human capital. It involves knowledge audits. It involves organizational design. All of the things that we touch in the knowledge management umbrella are critical prerequisites. And then from there, jumping off points to better knowledge creation and management.
I think that's just so important. And it's a message that I hope we will have some HR listeners. Certainly we'll be sharing this podcast with my community, because I don't know that it's always appreciated within HR what is already there if you have a knowledge management program in your organization. And if you don't, what is possible? When we're talking about what skills do we need, what skills do we have, in HR, we think about workforce planning. But we've done a lot of research over the years on workforce planning at APQC. And what hasn't come up is leveraging what KM knows about the workforce, leveraging their access to experts, leveraging their understanding of how work is actually getting done. So that's helpful at the beginning when you need to figure out what skills you need and how you're going to get those. But it's also critical for that ongoing capability of workforce agility in your organization, because some of your earliest signals that something different is needed can come from the insights that are coming from communities of practice, things you're hearing from your experts, things you're seeing about where people are seeking knowledge in their workflows. So for HR, this is a wealth of potential information if you already have knowledge management. And if you don't, this is information that you don't have, and it's not something HR collects in the same way.
Right.
So it's something really to consider building in your organization. I think it really, being able to tackle, upskill, reskill your workforce challenges requires insights, as Liz was talking about. It requires information and collaboration across an organization. And KM can be kind of a steward, a connector, I think, as Liz, as you said, about not only connecting those people, but adding another piece of information, another perspective that is critical to understanding where your workforce needs to go and how you can get there, and what resources you already have that can help you get there.
For sure. Yeah, I would agree with that. And it depends on the organization too, as well. But I know in an organization I was with, HR was its own silo in and of itself. And while this isn't true for every HR professional, even in that organization, the culture was very us versus them, which is really sad and really scary, because HR should be there to support the employees. And I think sometimes just having that label can not be a great thing. And only speaking from my experience in that one organization, as somebody who was in KM doing they weren't even exit interviews as much as it was retention interviews and all these things. I was getting more information as a trusted person in KM than I think I would have if I had a title in HR, which is really kind of a bummer, because there are so many HR professionals who want to be able to connect and do the different pieces. So being able to rely on the KM team and partner with is huge. So, and I'm treading lightly here because I don't want to offend HR people. Remember, I do have the training and the HR background as well. Like I said, I don't want to offend. When I've talked to different people in HR as well, it's been that experience for them too. So at one point in the organization I was with, while I was in KM, somebody super high up had said, "This is amazing work that you're doing. I should pick you up and put you in HR." And like all of us hit the brakes. We're like, whoa, 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 whoa. That won't work in this environment, right? Yeah. I think that's where the collaboration and the coming together, like not stay in your lane, but let's merge together and have two parallel lanes that we work with. Like I pop in one another's, but that's the beauty of a partnership and collaboration. So I say this every episode, but like off my soapbox now, back to the important stuff.
I mean, but it also speaks to A, how people feel about HR. There's this kind of really old trope, right? But B, also how, and it's not just HR, but just because this is the example that we're working with, how people misunderstand what knowledge management is actually doing. So I've had in previous roles, a lot of HR people be really anxious because they think that I'm trying to take their job. And really it's like, no, I am making this onboarding guidance and I just need you to look at it from an HR perspective to make sure that we're on the same page and I'm including the right things and the right policies. And you're coming at it from your point of view. I'm coming at it from the knowledge retention and the employee life cycle point of view, and we can actually make this really strong for both of them. And everyone usually 90% of the time is like, okay, but it's just this broader PR issue, I guess, that KM and HR like they have with each other, right? But yes, we love HR. For anybody who's watching or listening, just
We
make it
do. We
super
love it.
clear. We love HR.
Yeah, again, Rachel, you're defending HR, and I feel, definitely want to defend them too. In both KM and HR are working towards, a common goal ultimately, but both are usually under tremendous pressure and have lots of resource constraints, maybe competing for some of the same resources. So, I don't think it's any ill intent. Some of it is just not knowing, HR just not really knowing the scope of what KM does and not being exposed to that. But some of it is just that broader work environment that each group is trying to, thrive in that kind of influences how things play out every day.
For sure.
Quick comment about that. As I continue to boundary scan, that's what I do. I scan the board, lots of different issues, and then I automatically figure out how they might work together. Just started to see the term work design and the terms pro-people or pro-human, depending on the source. MIT calls it pro-human. But because I'm talking about pro-human augmented AI tools, I'm not talking about automation, but because I'm talking about that, if we wanted to sort of gravitate away from preconceived notions about what KM is and what HR is, what we're talking about is a collaboration for better workforce design, which isn't necessarily limited to learning and development, huge component, but workforce design is now a thing that could be any number of us from familiar traditional disciplines. So if you're trying to steer clear a little bit of any, landmines as you discuss this, look for things that talk about workforce design or work design and see what you start to see.
I think that's so important because that's become, as this conversation has evolved in the HR space as well as talking to members, it was the skills issue that was really building AI skills that was really important. But I'm also hearing work design, and we're seeing that, starting to study that in our research as well. And so that is becoming a really important point. And I do think it's another area where the executives and the C-suite in your organization are starting to understand the importance of that, because a lot of organizations haven't seen the early benefits that they thought they would from AI. And part of that is because they haven't considered work design. That kind of goes along with they haven't considered enough those support systems to continue that learning on the job, which is where KM can really help, but definitely also org design. That's another area of potential collaboration and where we're working towards the same ends and in a way that really can show our value to the business on this urgent issue.
So then how else should we reframe our language? So we're talking about workforce design, we're talking about organizational design. How else should KM practitioners specifically reframe our language for human capital management or a business audience so that it lands without using, because in the snow globe, we have our own KM jargon and we have our own stuff. But what else, what are other things that we should be talking about or reframing that language so that it lands better with HR and other units?
I talked about this already a bit in preparing for today. Leading with the business problem instead of maybe a KM term, I think is a great solution because we are trying to solve very similar business problems. And so that can kind of get around getting stuck with the jargon or terminology. Everybody's going to be able to connect probably more easily to that common shared business problem that they're trying to solve. And just instead of maybe using the term, talk about, what that KM tactic, for example, actually accomplishes for you. So maybe instead of saying community of practice, you're talking about faster peer learning, of spreading of useful practices among employees, and something like expertise location. Maybe instead of using that terminology, talking about who can help, who can we rely on when training doesn't cover something fully. We don't we know we have a need, but we have no idea how to actually translate that into learning. And so you could talk about those use cases, those needs, as opposed to the terms. Not that you wouldn't use the terms too, but maybe not lead with them. I don't know, Liz, what are your thoughts?
Depends on the day and the hour. I think about this all the time and in my research as well. And I don't have an answer ready for you on this. I echo the things that you said about what these capabilities in our respective silos can result in for better human in the loop, human driving. And so I'm kind of muddling around because, the typical thing is upskill everyone. Well, to do what? I mean, what we're looking at in this iteration of workforce upskilling is now not a one and done. It is we're looking at this particular program or operation, and we want to, of course, equip you with ways to understand your judgment, all your human capacities that are skills that AI can have. Of course, we want to look at how to develop those within your context of business processes and information flow. So that's very tailored for what the team is dealing with now. And I definitely see a knowledge manager as a facilitator and in tandem with a human capital manager who's observing how things are evolving or not evolving and what do we need to bolster and nurture, et cetera. The answer for that is we know that we're not always going to know all the tools. We know that we're not always going to apply all the tools to all the things, but we know in this particular unit, this is the business process. This is where we want to either automate or use augmented AI tools with human problem-solving skills and querying. So the short answer is it is the people in the organizations that need to be brought together and integrated with these different aspects. And various people in an organization may have a knee jerk of, I do not want another training. However, this training will be tailored to their problems or their teams or their skills that they want to develop. It's not going to be a cookie cutter thing. And here's where I really see knowledge management as an important stakeholder. It doesn't have to be formal learning and development. It can be understanding through conversations, through dialogues, through peer-to-peer learning, through things that knowledge managers are very adept at to facilitate those conversations and exchange that learning. So none of this is going to be in a vacuum, but I think if we can somehow find ways to communicate that if you want to keep your workforce in your organization, you want retention, and you want to keep them capable and agile for who knows what, because it's all so uncertain. Focus on your people, focus on their skill sets, capabilities, and what they want to evolve toward. And that's right now where I'm landing.
I mean, I think the work in progress thing is something we're all experiencing, right? Like, it's especially while we start to think about this and think about the through lines and areas for collaboration. So, yeah. Brittany, what are your thoughts here?
I mean, I think it's something that it's going to continue to evolve. Just like we talk about the future of work and workforce development and stuff like that, all of this is going to evolve because it's all things that enable that part of the business. So I think work in progress is the best, it's kind of, the best way to describe it. And if it's not AI, in 10 years, it's going to be something else that we're going to have, so this is something that is not one and done. It's not one of those, types of initiatives. So I think that, Liz, we're hitting on a really important thing, and I want both of you to kind of help us go deeper with it. I have a team. I have a small team. I have a small budget. I can't tackle workforce agility all at once. What is a collaboration point between my team as the knowledge management team and your team as the human capital management team that we could start doing tomorrow, given my constraints?
I think as coming together, share your knowledge of what the most pressing needs are. I mean, think that the first connection point is really, we each have pieces of understanding what the workforce needs, what you need in the organization, what you have, but coming together, just share that knowledge and share where's that knowledge stored in your organization. And honestly, just making that connection, not only that one time, but how can we make sure that we're sharing that information continuously? And that doesn't necessarily have to cost money. It is an investment in time, but I think we just at the very beginning, just understanding what each party brings to the table. What do we each know? And I think from there, you really start talking about that. It becomes more self-evident that, the synergies, it's not one or the other. It's different, but both really useful and necessary. So that's kind of one starting point there. And, Liz, you talked about the CEOs, the C-suite really being specific or giving thought to what they need, what they think the workforce needs. And so it's really honing in on, okay, from that, what is highest priority? What is something where we think we can have some success working together towards specific capability? Those would be areas that I would focus on.
I would completely agree there, Elissa. But when you talk about a smaller team, and I do, this is a whole separate thought process for me. How do we adapt something like this to small to medium businesses? But specifically to your question, Brittany, I think it would be very important to have an understanding across the board of which people in that smaller team have which amazing properties in their ways of solving problems. What are their gifts? I took a Spark type test eons ago, a very quick test to talk about what sparks me in my work. And I think that's a worthwhile pursuit when you've got a smaller team. Learn if they don't know, have them figure out or discern what sparks them to do their best work. And then how does that overlap, complement, or fill a gap on your team? And which of these types of human capacities or capabilities would you like to bolster with any given person? Individual conversations like, I see this is something that you're extremely strong at. What would you like to explore more to strengthen and grow that capability, which is uniquely human? So I would focus more on, okay, this is our group. This is what we bring. What do we need to be bringing? How do we develop that? But again, it's all about the integration of diverse viewpoints, what are the goals that we want to point these skills to, and allowing that time to have those, as we say, water cooler conversations, even if it's virtual, So it's both a formal understanding of, I'm an essentialist and a sage. Are those things sexy? No, but people need them.
Yes.
When the person individually understands where they are with their gifts, they can confidently sit in a discussion, either one-on-one or in a group. This is where I feel I do my best in these types of contributions and talk about it either individually or in a group to determine what do we have in far as capabilities and capacities, and what do people want to add or strengthen.
I love that you brought the conversation here, Liz, because so often being in HR, I'm thinking about things from a big kind of organizational perspective, but I love that you're bringing it back to the human piece and not just what the organization needs, but what your employees want and what they think they can uniquely maybe bring without having those conversations, especially right now with work changing so much because of AI. Having that information, really is key. And if you're thinking about wanting more productivity and speeding time to productivity, that's going to only be better if somebody is the individual worker is aligned, that what you've aligned what the business needs with what they're interested in learning or what their strengths are that they want to apply more. So I think that's a part of this whole discussion and this upskilling conversation that maybe we don't give enough attention to the people side that I know you've done so much research and thinking around.
Why do you think so much of our learning needs to happen in the flow of work rather than the formal courses, especially when we're doing AI-driven upskilling? And I know that we had talked about the learning orgs, and we've talked a bit about how people don't want to go to another training, but thinking about that question, and then the other piece to that, from a KM perspective, would be the best practices that you can use to support your continuous learning, like communities, embedded expert roles, stuff like that. I would love to kind of think about that overlap and that connection between the two, each from your perspective.
I can start because what you're saying sparks some thoughts in my head and why I am so passionate about this topic and the importance of KM to learning in organizations. The way learning has been traditionally done, it's still valuable, but there's an aspect to it, what organizations need and employees need today, that it doesn't fully address, that KM does. So skills are changing so quickly. So there's always going to be uncertainty about what the business needs and how quickly can we understand that and then develop learning opportunities. So I believe we need some of that to happen more organically on the job. I believe we have to have a more deliberate approach to having our employees identifying what needs to be learned and sharing that. And this expertise location, your experts are going to be connected to where things are going, and they might be your greatest asset in figuring out how to deliver learning. And it may not be in that traditional classroom environment. And then I think about AI, and I just think about my own organization and our evolution of using AI and trying to figure out the human in AI strengths and where you put those together. And what I've observed, we've had formal trainings, and those are important and useful, but often those are broad and more generic, not specific to a certain function or role. And what I've found has been most useful for, at least for my team, in terms of improving our productivity and using AI in ways that leverage our expertise as humans, but what AI does best. A lot of that learning has happened through knowledge sharing. And, being a knowledge management organization, we have those vehicles in place. And that has been a huge asset for us because we're able to not only be sharing, but sharing within our work at that moment of need. And I think that that's one of the reasons why traditional learning needs to be supplemented or complemented by a lot of the approaches that KM has had and it is really good at. Traditional frameworks and approaches that I just think are just critical today, given the type of learning and the speed with which learning needs are changing.
Couldn't agree more with you, Elissa, about that. We frequently hear the no-do gap phrase. In our world, I'm sure that it's out there in other iterations. But in my view and in my experience and what I've observed from my peers, yes, you might want to have a learning that's driven by an agent or by a customized GPT, but there is no better learning than simulating together with an expert, a middle person, or someone who's learning to skill up than doing, because you meet the problems, you can simulate the problems and help the person who's trying to understand how better to solve the problems, or what does the person who is mentoring me know about this problem? I'm going to tackle it. I'm going to reach maybe some obstacles, and this person will take the opportunity at an appropriate moment to say, well, here's why I think we could go at it this way. And in that moment, this more senior, let's call it a journeyman, is sharing why they chose how to do something over another way to do it. I decided to approach this problem based upon my experience. They're not going to say all these things. They're just going to say, well, keep in mind, and they're going to talk about the things that aren't in a program. They're going to talk about the things that they learned the hard way, sharing stories, etc. So in that moment, I vastly prefer more time with people to get to understand how these tools can serve people, and more time with people to vet what is an approach that works for this given context. And so I don't think that the idea of people learning in a vacuum is going to be that useful in our current situation. And just that problem solving, getting through that problem solving, both yourself in real life and then understanding how the problem was solved from someone who is much more expert at it, I think is the better learning experience. And I know that all the KMers understand that as well. And then, of course, having that culture and that vulnerability to share, wow, this was a thorny issue and I didn't know what to do, so let's talk about what you would have done, or, all these things that really rely on conversation, thought processes, problem solving, and just to get down to it, know how.
I want to talk about the takeaways because we've had 2 very comprehensive episodes with this discussion. I think that we've gone really deep on this topic, which is great. There's so much more that we could unpack. So if you guys are, if you 2 are willing, we might have you back for even a third. But I think there's a lot of takeaways for our listeners and those who watch us on YouTube about HR, learning and development, knowledge management, how it all comes together, the importance of workforce design, org design, the future of work, AI readiness, all of these things. We've had these 2 episodes. What are the things that you want people to walk away with? What are examples of things that work? But what would, if someone, especially who really isn't maybe as familiar, a lot of people who listen to our podcast are obviously KM practitioners, but there are some people who are less familiar with KM that want to learn, that listen to our podcast. So what would you want someone like that to walk away with from our conversation? Besides,
Great
HR is awesome and KM is awesome and everyone should do it.
Yeah. Great question.
I would say, and thank you for that question, I would say that people do really have a knee jerk to any kind of mention of AI. I think if you're looking to understand how best to interact responsibly with AI, you need to understand what your capabilities are. What are you really good at? What can you posit initially that is yours, your team's, and then use augmented AI tools to be able to explore those further. Not to ask the AI tools, what should we do? I think number one, as a knowledge person, anybody is a knowledge worker, they need to understand where their skills and capacities and unique abilities lie. If you don't know those things, you really are going to flounder. Then you need to understand that in strengthening those things that are already inherently, positives and super skills for yourself, strengthening those, you will be able to feel more confident about how you will be interacting with your team or individually with AI tools. And so start with the human focus of yourself and how what you've got can be brought into to complement and value add to the team, the small organization, the big organization. What do you bring and what more do you want to have to be able to contribute in an augmented AI situation? So that's a really important takeaway. You'd have to know what tool to use. You'd have to know why it works and what it's doing. You have to know what makes you the expert. And that takes away the overwhelm of, I don't know where to start. What strategy? Why can't I just use this in a scattershot way? And, you must know what your abilities and capacities that make you uniquely human in order to able to sharpen them and apply them to the best advantage of your team or for your company. And then I would say that any organization, small, large, or behemoth, needs to understand that this will take time and all hands on deck to develop a comprehensive, integrated approach to giving learning opportunities and knowledge exchange and knowledge sharing that favor human interaction so that then humans with their capabilities and their understandings of the context can really wield these tools in the best way.
Great thoughts.
Yeah.
This has been such a good conversation. And I like to echo what Brittany had already said. I would love to have you back again to even dive deeper, because even a continued series on this, because this is, like AI, like technology, like people, we're all always evolving, right? So I'd be interested to hear how this goes again in 2 months, 3 months, however many months from now, to kind of see if perspectives have changed.
And they change constantly.
Oh, yeah, obviously. Yeah. But just to get new thoughts and reactions to things. Brittany, what else are you thinking?
Elissa, that research for APQC, are we able to link to that? Is that something that's public and we can share with our audience?
Some of it is, and I will share those links
Great.
Okay.
of what is public. And, certainly we continue. I know, Liz, you continue to, to research in this topic. We're continuing to research. So hopefully over time we can have some new ideas to share, and maybe we'll get some feedback from listeners to kind of help shape our conversations and how we're thinking about these things.
For sure.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in connecting with people who are going through this and who are trying to implement it and what they're finding.
Mm.
What are the challenges? What are the roadmaps? I want to link the research, which is consistent. This research is consistent all across the board. I read about it and I think, well, who can even do all of those things? Who can give that time? Who can reimagine how management interacts? I want to know what's really going on. Is this research, or are these findings, or are these data pointing to things that are really going on? Of course they are, but how can we make that real for the people who we talk to?
So then, Liz, if people want to connect with you on this, because you're asking them, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you?
I have a LinkedIn profile that I shared in my bio, and they can reach me there or with my email address.
Awesome.
Okay.
Both will be in the show notes, so folks can grab them. And Elissa, the same for you. LinkedIn, I'm sure.
Or email, yeah. I mean, we would love to hear as well. I think that's where we really want to delve in, because I do talk to members who are tackling pieces of this and who are wrestling with, what works and what doesn't. And so I do think there's a whole nother level of this discussion that
Definitely.
we could have when, as Liz said, we marry this data with what's really happening. What are the true experiences of those people who are really doing this work right now? I think that would be so not only interesting but beneficial. To be able to, in the spirit of knowledge management, share those lessons learned more broadly, so everybody can get good at this workforce adaptability.
And just having those examples in different size organizations or projects will really, I hope, empower other listeners to understand that you can model, you can shape, you can tailor, you can tweak to what you think is good for your organization. And I would love to be able to highlight what is happening in the real world, in real life.
So you heard it here. Liz and Elissa are making themselves available for your feedback. So please take them up on that.
Yeah, definitely. Or just grab some coffee and have a great conversation, because both are fantastic.
Way
to
to close that loop, Rachel. It was good.
Coffee. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Liz and
been
Elissa,
awesome.
yes, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation.
Yes, this has been super fun. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for listening, and thanks for getting our intro arranged, Rachel, with Elissa and I. I'm just so pleased to be able to collaborate with you, Elissa.
It's been wonderful. So thank you so much for connecting us. Super fun, and I know we'll stay connected.
Yeah, it's my superpower. Bringing people together.
It is your superpower.
This episode of Not Another KM Podcast was edited by me, Rachel Teague. It was produced by Rachel Teague and Brittany Persinger. Our fantastic theme music was created by Chase Tremaine Music. Questions, comments, quips, quotes, or conundrums? Reach out to us at nakmpod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your support.